Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Robinson, and I'm the Executive Editor for SC Media. Welcome to the Cyber Risk Alliance Application Security eSummit. Our next session is Beat the Bots, Not Your Users, sponsored by White Ops. A steady stream of data breaches combined with an uptick in remote work is creating a heyday for cybercriminals to exploit stolen data and credentials for account takeover attacks. And like enterprises, bad actors are using automation to work faster and more efficiently. Today's bot traffic originates from infected consumer devices and mimics human behavior, flying under the radar of anomaly-based detection methods to gain access to applications and perform costly fraudulent transactions, generate fake content, and influence abuse incentive and discount programs, and steal sensitive information at scale. But in the battle to protect your web and mobile applications from costly attacks and abuse by bots, it's important not to punish your legitimate users with annoying extra steps and slowdowns. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Our speakers today are Dr. Russell Handorf, Principal Threat Intelligence Hacker, White Ops, and Kat Wang, Senior Director of Business Development, Application Security at White Ops. Russell develops technology to detect and deter advanced botnets. He recently worked at the Federal Bureau of Investigation in Cyber Division's Technical Operations Unit as a computer scientist, where he developed and implemented technology that aided in the investigation of criminal and national security matters. So served in and helped lead the cyber action team in investigating some of the most critical investigative matters the FBI was pursuing at the time. Prior to the FBI, he worked as a senior security analyst for the Federal Reserve and built a company called Closed Networks that provided secure wireless communications for municipalities to residential broadband internet access. Kat manages White Ops' global business development team and application integrity, and they spend their time working with enterprise CISO teams and addressing their business challenges as the recent remote work scenario has accelerated the need to detect and mitigate sophisticated bot fraud. She brings her personal passion for innovation and moral consciousness to the global development and adoption of InfoSec technology. Prior to joining White Ops, Kat spent 16 years at Google, establishing and maturing a diverse scope of products, including ads and platforms, cloud marketing solutions, and emerging technologies within Google's startup incubator Area 120. They're experts in their field, and I am delighted to welcome them here today. Hi, Russell and Kat. Let's get started.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Terry, for that warm. And thank you to the attendees for Application Security eSummit for joining us today. As Terry mentioned, my name is Kat Wang. I am the Senior Director of Application Integrity at White Ops. As mentioned earlier, we are here to discuss a growing threat to enterprise applications, specifically sophisticated bots. And while some of you may have bot mitigation solutions in place, security teams often choose to work with White Ops to protect them against account takeovers, credential stuffing, fake accounts, etc., because we're able to detect incrementally more bots while minimizing management effort and user friction. So before I jump in, I think it's helpful for us to understand the landscape for how sophisticated bots are compromising applications. So as Terry mentioned, I'm joined by Dr. Russell Handorf, Principal Threat Intelligence Hacker at White Ops. Russ, it would be great if you could kick us off with a bit of insight as to what you're currently seeing in terms of prominent threat profiles in applications.
Well, good afternoon or good day to everyone out there in TV land. I am an employee of White Ops in the threat intelligence section of the organization, where we study threat actors on the internet and a variety of platforms and methodologies to disrupt their ability to conduct cash out functions and monetizing their criminal activities. For that is part of the mission of White Ops is to disrupt the economics of cybercrime. And a couple of things that we have been seeing over the last couple of months that has shown up of particular interest have somewhat been related to the pandemic that everyone is dealing with, and some because the criminal actors themselves are on this planet and are dealing with it themselves, and adapting and having to handle employee workforce challenges and situations. But in addition to that, the types of crimes, of how they're being executed, has changed, because there are now more devices in residential IP space that are available to be targeted by these criminal actors, because they are not as well protected, much like many of the corporate assets are, that have high fidelity and highly tuned network visibility appliances like intrusion detection prevention systems, so on and so forth. And some of the specifics that we have seen are an uptick in embedded devices such as media players and television sets and mobile phones being those mechanisms and platforms for conducting criminal activity on the internet. And our ways of how we study these are partially due to our own development of deception platforms here within White Ops to do long-term studies and analysis of not just the malware, but whenever we take a step to analyze something, what does the threat actor do to counter our action as well? And some of those actions that we take are working with our customers and partners in order to do, removal of malicious software out of various platform stores, to working with law enforcement agencies, both domestically and abroad, in order to have a positive impact for the internet in the disruption of those botnets that are out there. Now, the approach that we have taken in these investigations of using this long-term strategic analysis of malware has led us into a very interesting position recently, where we were able to negotiate a trade for an actual infected phone from an infected user, and the data that we were able to get off of an infection in the wild was above and beyond anything that we would have been able to simulate in the laboratory environment in many other such as like many other places. But some of the other things that we do to determine whether or not something is getting ready to happen is that many folks in our team have honeypot accounts in social media platforms or other subscription services where we may have our own legitimate ones, but we have ones on the side as well. And for myself, I've noticed just recently an uptick in the last 2 weeks of a variety of my honeypot accounts getting compromised across multiple different platforms that are related to media streaming and content services. And what is particularly interesting for that is, one, short of the account being there's like legitimate attempts to try to take the accounts over, but trying to game out and think out why someone would want to do that. And some of the constructs that we've come up around are because like payment card information is protected inside of those things. Well, there's always the resale of those accounts to other locations in the country, in other countries around the world that may not have access to the same media and content. But there's also a potential for testing user credentials from one platform to another, such as credential stuffing attacks and the like. So we've seen a lot of uptick as it relates to credential stuffing attacks, and our honeypot accounts were kind of an illumination of that. But in addition to that, we see the various embedded system platforms providing technological resources for the scaling of those types of attacks. So that's kind of what we're seeing out there at the immediate moment. And the technologies and solutions that White Ops has developed has greatly, from what I have seen, assisted in the mitigation of these strategies to cash out and strategies to further continue cybercrime from a variety of different actors that are out there. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to you, Kat.
That's great. Thank you, Russ. I especially appreciate your point about the honeypots. being compromised in your streaming services. It's a really interesting kind of canary in the coal mine type of approach. Just to walk you a little bit through the macro level of our approach here, the Enterprise Strategy Group published a paper last February highlighting the growing challenges in the modern application protection. And as you'll see, I think you'll probably agree that we spend a lot of our time and our practices focusing on the middle and the left-hand boxes here, detecting vulnerabilities or misconfigurations in applications. But to what Russ was saying earlier, fraudsters are exploiting these legitimate applications by ignoring those vulnerabilities altogether and by compromising real human identities using sophisticated bots. So Russ talked earlier about the compromisation of personal devices as a way of gaining access to credential information. So even the most anti-fragile application platforms are still at the mercy of the 15 billion records exposed in the last 6 years that can be used by sophisticated bots or residential infected devices with malware to impersonate actual human logins. So, I mean, if we kind of take all of that together, our CEO and co-founder likes to ask this prominent question: is if we put ourselves in the shoes of the criminals, if we could look like a million humans, what could you do? In order to get that scale of impersonating millions of people, you need a pretty sophisticated setup. So you'd need to fly under the radar of detection, for example, by faking legitimacy, having user cookies, IP addresses, user device IDs, in some cases CAPTCHA solves, and likely human attributes like mouse velocity, browsing hours of time of day, etc. So as we've kind of bringing it back to the core of the topic today, is these are all characteristics of bots, sophisticated bots in particular, where about 75% of the bots that we were seeing is coming from residential devices infected with malware, as I mentioned earlier. So I won't go through all the stats, but as you can kind of see, in aggregate, this is a pretty severe problem. When sophisticated bots look and act like humans, they are able to evade anomaly-based or anomaly-dependent detection, leaving security platforms at risk for incidents and breaches. So Forrester estimates ATOs in particular to be anywhere from a $6.5 to $7 billion problem. Not only because of the number of exposed records, but also predominantly because of best practices around personal password reuse and MFAs. They're not widely known or accepted, and account takeovers have never been easier or cheaper for cyber criminals. So brute force cracking tools, account checkers, etc. They're all available on criminal marketplaces for an average of $4 a pop. Recently launched new business models like account takeover as a service. A criminal can rent an identity for less than $10. And then, of course, with high accuracy rates of CAPTCHA solvers in a range of anywhere from 80 to 99%, we're forced as enterprises to add even more user friction to the experience in order to verify the identity when logging into platforms. And that's fundamentally flawed. We should not be creating friction for the humans. We should be creating friction for the bots. So let's take a look at the landscape a little more. I think we can all agree that simple IP-based protection like IP blocking or rate limiting, they're just simply not enough to stop the sophisticated bots of today. And the reality is the majority of the solutions are in the market right now, they're overly reliant on anomaly-based detection. So this poses three key challenges. The first is it's very manual management process. The bot detection platform will only be as good as the amount of effort that you put into training it. And it takes a lot of time and effort, in many cases, more time and effort than security teams have. It's also a very defensive approach. So you're only going to detect things after they've happened and not while they're happening. And then lastly, it's very siloed. It's myopic. There's no concept of leveraging a quote unquote network effect. In an ideal world, someone else's incident should actually be added to your detection algorithm so you're protected from it before it even happens to you. So as a result, kind of looking at the bots of yesterday versus the bots of today, anomaly-based detection only detects the simple bots of yesterday. And the approach that works is the one that combines substantial data, the sophisticated algorithms written by hackers, and a polymorphic Turing test, or interrogation, as we like to call it. So in light of all of this, we realized that the best approach is to take a fundamentally different one, because security teams need a solution that leverages collective protection. So as mentioned earlier, instead of being myopic, it should be inclusive. So it's not enough to play defense within your own silo. Security teams need to be benefiting from the incidences in other enterprises or other verticals, ensuring that they're protected from the similar type of activity before it even hits their web properties. It's got to be accurate, it's got to be precise, and it's got to be low maintenance from a security team standpoint. Security teams don't have time to manually train these detection platforms on what is fraudulent activity. So efficacy, precision, and low false positive rates is critically important. Let's not forget the user experience, right? That experience is paramount. We shouldn't be asking humans to verify their legitimacy. We should be trying to beat the bots and not genuine users. And also, I mean, FFA, SMS, those, protective measures, they cost money. And we only want to introduce friction like MFAs, CAPTCHAs, glocking, et cetera, when a high risk event occurs. So having kind of that front layer detection in place and then only showing CAPTCHA afterwards or an MFA is a little bit more of an efficient process. And then, of course, transparency and control. Security teams need transparency into the threat models and the categories that are most prominent to their business, so they can easily take action. So kind of thinking through all of the needs of the security teams when it comes to bot mitigation, we came up with a multi-layered detection approach that is specifically designed to stop account takeovers, fake accounts, credential stuffing, etc. Technical evidence based on our Turing test approach is our core differentiator. So we process 1.5 trillion transactions a day. That's 1.5 trillion instances where we evaluate the humanity of an interaction with over 2,500 signals to identify evidence of compromise. So that precision that this affords is incrementally more account takeover attempts mitigated than any other solution on the market, while maintaining the lowest possible false positive rate. Machine learning takes the massive quantity of data that we process and ensures that we're not only predicting malicious behavior, but integrating new attempts back into the platform for this kind of shared network effect, or as we like to call it, the collective protection. We also, as you heard from Russ earlier, invested in an elite team of white hat hackers we call our global threat intel team, many with backgrounds in law enforcement similar to Russ, who not only publish independent research, but also surf the dark web and reverse engineer malware to identify new trends to work back into our R&D. Continuous adaptation ensures that as bots adapt after their first failed attempt to get through, we continue to catch these bots with a second and a third tries, increasing their costs of operation each time and disrupting the economics of their account takeover attempts. And in terms of the insights that we provide, our real-time dashboard provides very deep details into the threat categories, aggregate trends, custom reporting, etc. We provide deterministic data on the bot activity happening on your site rather than threat rankings, or percentages. So you can leverage the reporting platform as a robust standalone tool, or leverage our reporting API to port the raw data for ingestion into your SIM or the like. So let's take a look at a case study. How has this methodology measured up in the market, and how are we holding true to the mission to disrupt the economics of cybercrime? Late 2018, White Ops led the largest global takedown in the history of FBI's cybercrime division. A global network of malicious bots, codenamed Eve, so spelled 3VE, infected 1.7 million residential computers, spun up over 10,000 fake websites, and generated 12 billion requests a day to commit ad fraud. So in partnership with the FBI, DOJ, Google, Facebook, and more, White Ops worked with all of these partnerships to attribute this malicious activity back to its source in the Ukraine. The FBI tracked 3 particular individuals from this botnet while they were on a flight to Bali for a surfing vacation, arrested them upon landing, and now they're sitting behind bars in Brooklyn awaiting trial. And we've published at least 6 more research papers similar to Eve of the bot fraud activity that we've been able to catch with our methodology. So kind of wrapping up, if you're finding that your current bot mitigation solution is insufficient, or if you're curious about how much bot traffic is actually hitting your site or your web app, we would love to work with you. We protect over 200 global brands, including the world's largest internet platforms. And as I mentioned earlier, we verify the humanity of over 1.5 trillion transactions a day. And our privacy sensitive code affords us a footprint larger than any single antivirus or threat detection platform on the internet. And in appreciation for the attendees of the Application Security eSummit, we're also offering an exclusive pilot. We're offering an extended pilot period and white glove service to trial our detection and mitigation solution at 0 cost. And for any clients that want to continue working with us after the pilot, we're happy to extend 2 months out of a 12-month contract at 0 cost as well. So if you'd like to see how White Ops can protect your enterprise app from account takeovers, credential stuffing, false transactions, and more, please reach out to us and request to see a demo. Thanks for your time, and we hope to work with you.
Okay, thanks, Russell and Kat. And now we're going to open it up to questions. How do you differentiate from WAPs and CDNs?
Great question. WAFs and CDNs, they offer a variety of solutions for enterprises. They often offer kind of like a checkbox bot mitigation, but that's not their core proficiency. So many of our clients choose to work with us by layering our technology on top of their current WAF or their CDN bot mitigation solutions, mostly to ensure that they're fully protected against account takeovers, credential stuffing, cracking, fake transactions, and even sensitive data scraping.
And in addition to that, I would like to mention that the solutions that we've developed for specifically credential stuffing are very straightforward and seemingly simplistic to implement. If the application is a web-based application, it is simply one line of JavaScript that gets placed inside the internet presence. If it's anything more than that, then that's part of the discussion for things like built inside of any kind of mobile platform app or anything else along those lines would require a little bit more discussion. But it's the integration process allows a lot more ease of specific targeting of protection mechanisms.
Okay, how do you handle user privacy, like GDPR, CCPA?
Yes, very good question. So our approach centers around one key philosophy, which is, like I said earlier, we should be interrogating the bots and not the humans. So as a result, the 2,500 different markers that we have, and they're not processing human data. They're not processing PII, which makes our tag inherently privacy safe. So it's a solution that a lot of the customers of our partners have found very valuable in terms of making sure they're adhering to a privacy-centric model.
And on top of that, we take a look at it as privacy by design. If there were a security problem or anything else along those lines. There's nothing of value in the data that we would have that would get released either through one means or another that would be identifiable to a user on the internet anyways.
Okay, how does the implementation work?
Yeah, so I'll give you a quick overview, and then Russ, please, chime in as you see fit. But I would actually suggest that we show you a demo. In short, as Russ mentioned earlier, we leverage a JavaScript tag that sits on whatever web surface you want to protect, or maybe even mobile SDK if you have a mobile need. When an unknown user comes in, we start to interrogate that unknown user. We receive key signals as part of the multi-layered detection methodology. And then we start doing Turing tests to determine if the unknown user is bot or not. And then there is a server-to-server integration or a proxy. Most of our customers prefer server-to-server though, and we provide a response of bot, valid, or non-standard, which simply means that while we didn't find any evidence that it was a bot, something about that instance was interesting and warrants investigation. And so once we return that response of bot, valid, or non-standard, the client can decide if it's a bot to block in most cases, or allow, or in some more complex cases, delay, tar pitting, or taking down deception paths with the intent of better understanding what the bots were going after, what their end goal was, or maybe to perhaps drop the floor under from them and have them fail out without knowing any indicator of where they failed. And in some cases, the deception flow also increases the cost of operation, like we mentioned earlier, pricing them out eventually, and as they continue to fail at achieving their goal. Russ, is there anything to add to that in terms of implementation?
Nothing specifically comes to mind other than I've been remarkably impressed as to how quickly this can be implemented in comparison to some of the other solutions I've seen when I was on the other side of the fence, if you will. It was remarkably effortless in the sense from a user's perspective, as having to integrate it, as well as having the privacy design by design component integrated with the solution was another thing that drew me towards this organization.
Okay, well, that's going to have to be it for the session. I'd like to invite you all to head over to the White Ops booth in our virtual exhibition hall, where experts are standing by to answer your questions. Just a reminder that this webcast will be available on demand beginning tomorrow at cyberriskalliance.com/eSummit. Thank you for being with us here today, Russell and Kat, and of course, thanks to everyone for tuning in.